So today we'll be talking about tending the garden, and the subtitle is Turning Compost into Flowers. So tending the garden, turning compost into flowers. And the intended metaphor here is that dissatisfaction and difficulty, the dissatisfaction and difficulty that we face in life is like compost that needs to decompose. But if we don't allow for the proper conditions, we may carry this decomposing mess with us for a long, long time. For many people, they never heal, and the compost decays and never transforms into rich soil or produces any flowers or fruit. It is much more difficult to have the capacity for our life, or for anyone else's garden for that matter, and to know what to do with it if our own garden is full of weeds and things aren't breaking down properly. I found out one time that if you toss a banana peel, not by doing it myself, by other people who have researched this, if you toss a banana peel out on the side of the road, it could take months and months or even years for it to break down and biodegrade. But if you create the proper environment and the conditions are right for it, that same banana peel could take just a couple weeks to break down properly. And in the same way, we can create the conditions for allowing our own suffering to transform. Rather than it taking years and years, or perhaps our entire lives, for something to break down properly, which keeps us from a healthy heart and mind and prevents nutrients in our life. With our mindfulness practice, we have the proper conditions to create enriching soil for our hearts and minds. Someone I've quoted quite a bit, Zen Master Suzuki Roshi, says, "Of course it is not so difficult to give some philosophical or psychological interpretation of our practice, but that is not enough. We must have the actual experience of how our weeds change into nourishment. If you have some experience of how the weeds in your mind change into mental nourishment, your practice will make remarkable progress. You will feel the progress. You will feel how they change into nourishment," close quote. So we can do this by studying ourselves, understanding our own garden with wisdom and insight, recording and observing with clarity, helping it to become a flourishing garden full of life, instead of it being choked out by our ignoring or avoiding the weeds. Sometimes we have to heal our own wounds first to come to some inner well-being. And when we tend our garden, our actions become the natural expression of a heart filled with gratitude, love, and compassion. One teacher I have several of their books, her name is Pema Chodron. She says that meditation practice isn't about trying to throw ourselves away and become something better. It's about befriending who we are already. The ground of practice is you or me or whoever we are right now, just as we are. That's what we come to know with tremendous curiosity and interest. Meditation practice itself is a way of watering that seed of unconditional friendliness towards ourselves. Close quote. So our mindfulness practice is helping pull weeds and plant seeds. Our meditation transforms what is difficult, like the decomposing compost in our life, and turns it into rich soil that can allow for new life to blossom and grow. And just like a nice and healthy garden, sometimes all that is needed is to just sit and enjoy it. When we practice allowing our minds to be at ease and fully present right here in this moment, it keeps us from postponing our joy and our peace and casting it out into the future like our society and culture trains us to do. The late Vietnamese teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said, quote, "It is possible to live happily in the here and now. So many conditions for happiness are available, more than enough for you to be happy right now. You don't have to run out into the future in order to get more," close quote. So as our practice takes root and our roots deepen and strengthen, it allows us to heal from the difficulties we have likely faced and the ones that we may have yet to face. Healing from the dissatisfaction we have with our life so much of the time. And as we live from this spaciousness and presence that is revealed to us in our meditation practice, it begins to transform the world around us as well. Not only because our perspective shifts from a sense of lack and perpetual dissatisfaction with life, which is where we spend most of our time, but because we're living from a place of greater ease with life, the people around us begin to benefit and enjoy the beauty of our garden. As we practice in this way and begin to shift out of this dissatisfaction and heal from our past or present difficulties, our life begins to pollinate and provide nourishment to other people and their gardens as well. As we explored in our session/class on bringing our practice into the world, tending to our garden isn't confined just to our 5 or 10 or 15, 20 minutes of sitting and practicing on the cushion. One of the principles of this practice is that in tending ourselves, we tend the world. And tending the world, we tend ourselves. So I'm going to be paraphrasing from one of my teachers here, but so it's not a direct quote. I've kind of like adapted it and changed some of the wording to help it fit a little better and be more personal to me. But it is a delusion that endless greed and profit, hatred and war will somehow protect us and bring us happiness in this life. The world is not in need of more. And if we want the world to act right, we've got to be willing to look at whether we ourselves are acting right. The world needs less greed, less hatred, and less ignorance. If our actions are born from anger, grasping, fear, and aggression, they will perpetuate the problems of the world. Even if we've begun to take on a bitterness or a cynicism towards the world, or if we've started to take on the world's bitterness and cynicism, through our inner practice of transforming compost into blooming flowers, we can learn to make the garden of our heart and mind a place of peace and integrity. And when speaking of how to work with our suffering and our relationships with other humans, Thich Nhat Hanh says, each person has a lot of anger and suffering inside. Each person has a lot of anger and suffering inside. When we don't know how to handle our suffering, we continue to suffer, and we can make other people around us suffer. When someone hurts us, our first reaction is to want to punish or to hurt them. But when we understand that others are already suffering, we don't want to punish them anymore. Listening to the suffering inside of you and inside of the other person allows understanding and compassion to sprout. And when compassion sprouts in your heart, it begins to heal and transform the anger and suffering in your heart and in every cell of your body. Close quote. So if we want to be at ease and able to respond wisely in the world, the first step is to learn to quiet the mind and be fully present for our life in each moment. The Zen tradition says that in this practice there are only two things. You sit and sweep the garden, and it doesn't matter how big the garden is. And it is simple. In our practice, each of us can contribute to the sanity of the world. We can tend to ourselves, and we can tend to others. And though it seems like we are separate from one another, we are not really separate. We are interdependent. Likely everything that you have is because of someone else who helped to produce it, and then you bought it, or someone gave it to you. So we are not self-sustaining entities which are separate and cut off from all the rest, even though this is how we are taught to think and see the world. We depend on each other, whether we know it and are aware of it or not. So we take time to be quiet, to open and to awaken. And then we carry that awakening out into the garden of the world. And paraphrasing one of my teachers, Jack, from his book called A Path with Heart. So we gain sustenance, clarity, and peace from our practice, and this is like breathing in. And then as we draw upon our inner well-being, part of our happiness is to carry it with us out into the world, into our community, our family, and friends. And this is like breathing out. So no one can do this practice for us. If we don't do it, we'll continue to stay caught in the weeds, stuck in our habit patterns and our conditioning, feeling disconnected, insignificant, separate, and cut off. But if we engage with this practice in our daily life, both on and off the cushion, we will see our garden bear fruit and transformation in our hearts and minds, and in our relationships, and in our life, and in the world around us. May we make good use of our life in each moment. And may our practice be of benefit not only to ourselves, but to all who might come into contact with us. Don't forget to be kind to yourself along the way, and if possible, to others as well. Thank you for your attention and your presence.